and zingine juu they are very expensive.
Ni maisha na afya kila
Hello, I'm Esther Githui. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up.
One of the primary indicators used to compile the annual World Press Freedom Rankings indicate that governments are failing to protect journalists. Also, on World Press Freedom Day, a respected Zambian journalist is recognized for highlighting critical environmental and climate change issues in Zambia and Southern Africa. And in our entertainment report, International Jazz Day makes its maiden voyage to Africa with an all-star concert. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
We begin this World Press Freedom Day with a reminder that the Voice of America is being temporarily suspended by the West African nation of Burkina Faso for covering a Human Rights Watch report about some recent massacres. VOA stands by its reporting about Burkina Faso and intends to continue to fully and fairly cover events in that country. The Voice of America strictly adheres to the principles of accurate, balanced, and comprehensive journalism. Meanwhile, of the 5 indicators that media watchdog Reporters Without Borders used to compile its 2024 World Press Freedom Index, the political indicator has been the most problematic, showing that governments failed to protect journalists. VOA Nairobi Bureau Chief Mariama Diallo has more.
During elections in many parts of Africa, journalism has suffered. That's the findings by media watchdog Reporters Without Borders, or RSF. Sadibou Marang is the head of RSF's Sub-Saharan Africa Bureau, based in Dakar, Senegal.
We have seen, for example, in Madagascar, where nearly during the election period, nearly 10 journalists has been, either attacked or persecuted or even arrested. We also have seen the same trends during election time in Nigeria, where nearly 20 journalists and 20 reporters, they have been attacked, persecuted, and harassed during the election.
Marang says they've also observed that in some places, politicians created their own media outlets to impose their own narratives.
This was the case, for example, in Senegal, where we have seen ahead of in the run-up to the election, for example, the birth of many newspapers, most of which were belonging to politicians.
Restrictions on access to information was also noted in the Sahel region. Niger's ranking fell 19 places to land at 80, Burkina Faso plummeted 28 places to rank 86, and neighboring Mali is at 114th place. All 3 countries are run by military juntas.
In Burkina Faso, there is no longer international media. There is no longer international reporters, international correspondents. That's also the case in Mali, and that also has been the case in the latest junta's ruling countries, which is Niger.
Last week, Burkina Faso suspended several Western and African media over their coverage of a Human Rights Watch report alleging the killings of civilians earlier this year by the country's military. The U.S. Department of State this week said it's very alarmed by the action.
Far too many governments use repression to silence free expression, particularly against journalists and media organizations for simply doing their jobs.
In East Africa, Eritrea took the last spot in the rankings. One of the world's most censored countries, the government there has shut down all independent media houses for more than 20 years, according to Freedom House. And as of late 2023, the Committee to Protect Journalists said that 16 reporters remain behind bars. But in other places in the region, Victor Buwere, Director for Media Training and Development at the Media Council of Kenya, lauds what he calls a dynamic media space.
Uganda has, I think, 300 radio stations, Tanzania more than 300 radio stations, Kenya has 290 radio stations. That tells you that largely we are talking about a very expanded media space.
But there are still challenges associated with the profession in the region, he notes.
If you are a journalist in Uganda and you have seen, especially around election time, if you put on a press jacket, you are marked to your end.
There are a few countries on a positive trajectory, including Mauritania, where state media dominates the landscape, but abuses against journalists decreased, making it jump 53 places in less than a year to rank the highest in Africa. Tanzania also rose 46 places. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Nairobi.
Climate change in Nigeria is causing intense weather conditions such as drought, desertification and flooding, contributing to increased poverty, food insecurity, scarce resources and conflicts. However, climate change is underreported in Nigeria. Some Nigerian journalists and newsrooms are trying to bridge this gap, but not without challenges. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja.
In 2021, journalist Kende Ogunyale moved to southern Nigeria's Cross River State from his base in Lagos to report on recent insecurity in the region. But he says once he arrived in Cross River State, he discovered another pressing issue.
My story narrative does tilted to that. I started telling several stories around how deforestation was affecting several local communities, and the flood came up in 2022, so that does propelled every journey that we had.
Ogunyale says his work inspired some communities to enact laws against harmful environmental practices. The United Nations says Nigeria is considerably impacted by climate change and warns extreme weather threats such as rising temperatures, drought, desertification and flooding could seriously damage Nigeria's agriculture, health and energy sectors by 2060 if not addressed. Despite increasing weather problems, authorities say many Nigerians are unaware of the dangers of climate change. But that's where some Nigerian newsrooms step in. They're trying to use their reporting to draw attention to the effects of climate change.
We now see more people, have a better understanding of the issues. People, ask questions. And because of the response and feedback we get, we are even encouraged to try and do more things. One of the things we want to do this year and next year is to, actually break down climate change concepts into local languages so that we can disseminate them to wider audiences.
However, there are challenges, including the lack of funding.
So newsrooms are looking at priorities of where will we get the funding that we need. So whether in terms of politics and others. So in Nigeria, a lot of time, politics, entertainment are some of the areas where you can get potential resources, unlike climate change.
Africa contributes just 4% of the global carbon emissions, which scientists say cause global climate change, but is most affected by that change. The African Development Bank says the continent needs $277 billion annually to deal with the problem. World Press Freedom Day this year is dedicated to a free press and its role as the global environmental crisis grows. Nigerian journalists say they will be trying to make an impact, one climate change story at a time. Timothy Obiezu, VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
For more on Press Freedom Day, I'm joined by Christina Caicedo-Smith, VOA's Press Freedom Journalist. Christina, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther.
First of all, tell us highlight the kind of projects you've been working on, especially related to the United States press freedom this year.
Well, during this World Press Freedom Day here at VOA, we worked on regional reporters covering DC specifically. So different reporters from different parts of the country, like Ohio, San Francisco, Pittsburgh. We follow one of them, who was Jonathan Salant, who has been a reporter for more than 40 years and covers the Capitol. One of the trends that we have, researched and reported about is how local journalism it's decreasing in the United States. So before, a couple of years ago, or more than a couple of years ago, we had over 100 of reporters covering the Capitol. People from around, reporters from around the country cover the Capitol. Now we have around 60 reporters covering the Capitol. And during an election year, it's very important to notice how, it could affect local communities.
But what caused that decline?
Well, different factors. What we did in our report was, talk to different experts, and they were explaining that one of them, since the pandemic, 2020, it decreased, immensely. Also, budget cuts. Usually, when local newspapers or local outlets have to cut in budget, they initially do with correspondents in DC. They, save their reporters locally. So those are some of the factors, and then some news outlets also go with agencies. So, experts and media advocates talk about how during an election year, there's no reporters from different counties in the country specifically covering, their legislators here in the U.S., here in the Capitol.
Right. As we mentioned, Reporters Without Borders has released their annual index of the state of the press freedom. But what's new in terms of your reading? What do you discover that is really hasn't been mentioned in the prior years?
Well, it's a discouraging outlook. The U.S. had trendingly for the last couple of years go down the scale. This year they went down 10 points, which is very surprising for an index, and for a country that usually has in its First Amendment, freedom of the press or freedom of speech. Other of the factors that we saw was about specifically how governments who are supposed to protect journalists and their work freely are not doing their work, or they're not doing their work correctly. So those are one of the main things that I saw in this report was that the three main countries which are defenders or which are very good at press freedom, that are Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, have also gone down on the index, which it's a trend that globally is going down.
Well, it makes me wonder: is journalism even here in the U.S. and other Western countries at risk?
I think advocates, when we report on media and we talk to media advocates and defenders, yes, there's a trending worry about how governments are not protecting their reporters, which also follows harassment due political factors or criminal groups around the world. And then we also have transnational crime or transnational exiled journalists who leave countries and also are followed back in other countries. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Christina, very quickly, we have 2 journalists from the United States that are detained in Russia. Do we know the status, what's their status, and whether the U.S. government is involved in getting them back home?
Well, the State Department, Ivan Gorshkovich, which has been more than a year detained in Russia, he has asked to be released in pre-trial. He hasn't been released, so he's still detained. Also, Kurmasheva, who still is detained, she has been there for the last 6 months. The State Department has responded to requests by VOA saying that they're working on it in both cases, but it's very delicate, the situation. Media advocates and organizations are promoting and pushing for the State Department and the U.S. government to move forward on this so they can get released.
Let's hope they get back home quickly. Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you.
Christina Caicedo-Smith is a VOA press freedom journalist. VOA asked journalists from different African countries what they see as their role in finding solutions to the global environmental crisis.
Hi, I'm Kathy Short, a journalist from Lusaka, Zambia. I became a journalist because I love writing stories and bringing those stories on your screens across the African continent. I also like talking to people from various backgrounds and bringing their interesting stories to you, our dearest viewers. I also love writing. And in light of this year's World Press Freedom theme, A Press for the Planet, journalism in the face of the environmental crisis. We are living in that reality in many parts of the world as millions of people are impacted by climate change. Here in Zambia, we are experiencing the worst drought in 20 years, giving journalists like me an opportunity to write more about environmental stories.
There are so many challenges for journalists themselves, and many journalists don't understand what climate change is. So there is need for training for journalists. That is one. Two, most of our media houses in Kenya are facing financial challenges. So you'll find that issues dealing with climate change are not given a priority. So there is need for enough financial muscles in these media houses to have departments dealing with climate change.
So we understand there's a lot of issues to do with the environment in the country. We have things to do with the floods last year. So our role there is to educate the public about the impact of environmental issues on them and other issues related to environment. Actually, the South Sudan journalists are doing a lot. You can see when the floods affected most of the countries, I think that was in 2021, there was a lot of coverage about the floods. We see journalists going to the fields, going to Jongole, which is mostly affected, to write the stories of the people who are affected by the floods. They went as far as to other states that are affected by the floods.
Hi, my name is Halima Athmani and I correspond to VOA based in Kampala, Uganda. This year's World Press Freedom Day, we are also talking about a press for the planet. Imagine a world without trees. Imagine a world without this lush green environment. How would you and I survive? Our job is to ensure we protect this environment. And as a journalist, we are going to talk about how do you and I protect this environment? How do you and I preserve nature? Because nature gives, and unfortunately lately, we are all about destroying nature. So for this year, as a journalist, we will talk more about environment. We will talk about preserving this environment and how it will give back to us.
African journalists talking press freedom and what they see as their role in finding solutions to the global environmental crisis. On this World Press Freedom Day, we are recognizing Paul Monde Shalala, a respected Zambian journalist at Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation. He is an award-winning environmental journalist committed to uncovering and addressing critical issues in Zambia and Southern Africa. His work highlights ecological challenges such as lead poisoning in Kabwe and the effects of climate change. His story is a testament to the role of journalists in environmental advocacy, shaping public opinion and influencing policy decisions.
I have been an advocate for the environment for many years. I actually started getting interest in issues to do with the environment when I was at high school. Here in Zambia, we have clubs at high school level. So one of the clubs that we have in high schools is what we call the environmental club. So these environmental clubs are the ones that teachers and schools use to train young people to be conscious of the environment, how to conserve the environment. I remember when I was a member of this club at high school, we used to go to different places to learn how to do conservation, how to protect the environment. And from the time I joined the journalism fraternity, the environmental beat has been one of those that I constantly report on. So this is a beat that actually keeps me going. Up to this day, I'm still working on environmental stories.
You are arguably one of the most decorated journalists that I know who has covered this space so well, to the extent that you've earned a lot of awards. You've been recognized both locally and internationally. What does that mean for you as you do your job?
I've done a number of stories that have earned me a lot of awards. One of them was a story I did way back. It was about a town in Zambia called Kabwe, which is, according to researchers, the most toxic town in the world. It's a town called Kabwe where there used to be a lead mine. Lead and zinc was being mined at Kabwe mine, which was closed in 1994. But from that time, the toxins from the mine have continued polluting the environment. Today, as we speak, over 100,000 people, mostly children, are affected by lead poisoning. So this is a story I did way back in 2017. Luckily, it actually helped me win the United Nations Correspondents Association Bronze Award, which actually took me to the UN. I had to receive this award from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. And it has actually given me motivation to even work more. And today, as I'm speaking, I just came back from Kabwe again to do a follow-up report on the lead poisoning and what is being done on the ground and the effect of the lead poisoning. And this documentary is likely to come out in the next 3 weeks.
Everybody is talking about the environment. You look at climate change, how climate change is affecting almost every corner of the world. As we speak, you have torrential rains or El Nino that is affecting the southern part and the East African part of Africa. So this is a bit that if I were you, I would not trade it for anything.
Zambia is passing through a phase where we've not had rain from February. The annual rain season from this part of the world starts in November and ends the following year, somewhere March, April. But we've not had rain since January, February. So you can imagine that out of the 2.5 million hectares of maize that has been planted, I'm made to understand that in America, maize is corn. So from the 2.5 million hectares that was planted, 1.5 million has already been destroyed. So you can imagine the devastation that has been caused by climate change. You have this devastation that is happening towards the human beings, but also with wild animals. And these are the bits that we as environmental reporters need to look at, show how impactful El Nino is.
Paul Monde Shalala is a distinguished journalist at the Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation. We have this programming note due to our extensive coverage of World Press Freedom Day. Our corruption series will continue on Monday with Nigeria and its consideration to introduce state police across the country's 36 states as part of measures to tackle militant attacks and mass kidnappings. So be sure to tune in. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll tell you about the world's largest celebration of jazz. We'll be right back.
World Press Freedom Day is here, and this year the focus is A Press for the Planet, under the theme Journalism in the Face of the Environmental Crisis. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we hear what environmental experts and journalists in Africa are highlighting as the issues at hand and available solutions in preserving our environment. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Season 4, rocking with the best.
In other news, Kenya's Interior Ministry says the death toll from flood-related incidents in the country is approximately 210, with 22 killed in the past 24 hours. Torrential rains have lashed East Africa, triggering flooding and landslides that has destroyed crops, swallowed homes, and displaced hundreds of thousands of people. Kenyan President William Ruto has postponed next week's planned reopening of schools until further notice. Ruto says meteorological reports paint a dire picture because of the possibility of Cyclone Hidaya hitting the country. An airstrike has killed at least 9 people, including 7 children, on Friday at a displacement camp in the Democratic Republic of Congo's eastern city of Goma, according to a local official. However, it remains unclear who is responsible for the strike. A 2-year offensive by M23 rebels, who are allegedly backed by Rwanda, has moved closer to Goma in recent months. And African climate tech startups are increasingly raising money from private sources, but while those funds for climate solutions are growing, a huge gap remains in meeting the actual financial needs for climate action in Africa. It's time for our entertainment report, and joining us now is Heather Maxwell, host of VOA's Music Time in Africa radio program with a look at jazz. Hello, Heather.
Hello, everyone. The world's largest celebration of jazz occurred on April 30th. UNESCO declared the day in 2011, and now it's celebrated in more than 190 countries. This year, Jazz Day made its maiden voyage to Africa. Tangier, Morocco, to be exact. It's the first Jazz Day ever to be held on the African continent. Legendary American jazz and pianist and composer Herbie Hancock explains the appeal of jazz from Tangier.
When people come to listen to the music, they can feel the joy that's coming from us. And this shared experience that the musicians have is also shared with the audience. That's why they come and they fill the auditoriums.
Africans have been celebrating Jazz International Day, which is actually a 4-day event for years now, like in Kenya and Ghana. I caught up with music journalist Bill Odidi, who describes how Nairobi swung it this year with an all-star cast, including trumpeter McKinley Mutsembi.
Well, you know, all of April, there's been so many events here in Nairobi to commemorate building up to the International Jazz Day, leading up to the big occasion which took place on Sunday, the 28th of April. So it was at Nairobi's Street Kitchen, which was an event organized by McKinley Mutsembi. Now, McKinley Mutsembi is a jazz musician himself. He plays the trumpet, and he's one of the founder members of a group known as the Nairobi Horns Ensemble, or the Nairobi Horns Project. And it's a very unique form of jazz that is played here because, yes, there is the elements of the smooth jazz and traditional jazz, but there's also some of the rumba feel that you get. McKinley performed, of course, besides organizing the event, but there are lots of other famous jazz and fusion artists who performed on the night, including people that you might know very well. Lisa Roduo, Noah performed, and of course Kasiva Mutua, who not just plays the percussions, but he's also a great guitarist. So it was a huge night, great variety, and fantastic performances to mark the International Jazz Day. And I can just see it getting bigger in years to come.
And in Accra, Ghana, Jazz Day was celebrated at the Alliance Francaise with several artists, including reggae legend Rocky Dawuni. And that's it for entertainment this week. You all have a jazzy weekend. Esther, back to you.
Thank you so much, Heather. Be sure to join Heather Maxwell every Friday right here on Africa 54 for her entertainment report. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.